People ask me all the time, can you actually learn to scratch on cheap beginner DJ gear? Today, I'm testing 6 beginner DJ controllers to find out what you can and cannot do, and which one I'd actually recommend. My name is DJ Blakey, and I'm a former DMC champion and pro scratch DJ of over 20 years. Each one of these controllers comes in at under $300. And in this video, I'm gonna test each one of them out with real, proper scratching techniques. So let's find out which is best. Now here are the rules. For each controller, I'm going to test out the same scratch techniques. We're going to try a baby scratch, a forward scratch, a chirp scratch, and a transformer scratch. Now the baby scratch and the forward scratch don't involve the crossfader at all, so this will be the best way of testing out the jog wheel on each controller. Now the chirp scratch involves using the jog wheel and the crossfader, so we can test out using both of those together. And finally, the transformer scratch involves heavy use of the crossfader, so we'll be able to test out the crossfader properly on each of these devices. We're going to be using Serato DJ Pro with all of these controllers, and we're also going to be scratching over the same instrumental just to keep things fair. So first up, we've got the Numark Party Mix 2, and my first impressions are I kind of like the jog wheels. They're a nice size in comparison to the size of the controller. The size of the jog wheel is important because obviously the bigger the jog wheel, the more control you're going to have over your scratch sample. For all of these tests, we're going to be using my own scratch sample tool. And if you would like to download it for free, then just hit the link in the description. So let's start with sample number 1 on my scratch sample tool. And I just want to get my first impressions of using the jog wheel. So there's a nice weight to it and it's not too loose. This is what I would call the resistance of the jog wheel. And it's super important because if the jog wheel is too loose, then you don't have that same amount of control over the sound. But at the same time, you don't want it to be too heavy. And I have to say, this actually feels like a real nice balance of the two. So now I'm going to play the beat and I'm going to do the baby scratch with the forward scratch to start with, and then we'll do the chirp scratch. And then finally, I'll try out the transformer scratch to really give the crossfader a workout. Okay, so I have to say I'm really impressed with this controller. The jog wheel has a really nice resistance and the fader is actually super smooth. A lot of cheap faders feel really plasticky and snappy and clicky, whereas this one, it really feels nice and smooth. But there is one thing that I need to mention. The cut-in on the crossfader when I was performing the transformer scratches felt a little bit slow. When it comes to scratching, you actually want the crossfader to turn on immediately as you move it over. But on this controller, the crossfader isn't quite sharp enough on the cut-in. When scratching with a crossfader, the sound needs to cut in the second you bring it over, like that. But this one has a longer gap than usual before the sound cuts in. Take a listen. Now that might not look like a lot, but when you're performing intricate scratch techniques like the transformer or the crab, having the crossfader take that little bit more time to cut in the sound really makes a big difference, which is a real shame because I would give this a really high score if it wasn't for that crossfader cut-in issue. But having said that, if you're a beginner and you want to learn how to scratch, then this would be a pretty good place to start if you're on a budget. Next up is the cheapest controller in this video, and it's the Hercules Starlight. Now looking at the size of the jog wheels, I can already tell that doing most scratch techniques on this controller is going to be quite tricky. Because if you look at my hand in comparison to the jog wheel, there really is not a lot of room for movement. So pulling off intricate techniques is going to be quite hard, I can already tell. The crossfader doesn't look too bad for such a cheap controller. It is very small though, smaller than usual. So it'll be interesting to see how I get on with doing the transformer scratch. Let's try it out. Okay, so I was actually quite surprised there at how many scratch techniques I was able to pull off cleanly. However, this thing is just too small for scratching. And I think if you're trying to learn to scratch on a beginner DJ controller, then this is just going to hamper you and make life more difficult. I was able to pull those techniques off because I've got years of scratching practice, but even for me, it felt awkward. It didn't feel quite right. You could see that I was using these two fingers on the jog wheel when I was bringing the sound backwards and forwards. And the pitch control, I'm almost hitting that with my fingers. I was having to actually think about not touching that pitch control. So that's far from ideal. I think this DJ controller would be perfect for a traveling DJ on a train or a plane or in a hotel room. But if you're a beginner and you want to learn to scratch, then I would avoid this because the jog wheels are just too small. It's just going to make your life more difficult than it needs to be. By the way, if you're enjoying this and you would like to take your learning even further, then I've put together 3 step-by-step scratching lessons that you can download by hitting the link in the description, and I will email them to you for free. Next up, we've got the Pioneer DJ DDJ-FLX4. Now, disclaimer, I have actually scratched on this quite a lot already. Now, this is the biggest jog wheel out of all of the controllers that we're going to be using today. And it gives you a lot of control over the scratch sound. The resistance on that jog wheel is really good. It's not too loose, it's not too heavy, it's just right. So now let's try scratching over a beat. Now for me, this is the best one so far. However, it's not quite perfect. So the crossfader is a little bit clicky. It doesn't have the same smoothness that the Party Mix crossfader had. However, this one cuts in immediately. There's no problem with the crossfader cutting on this, and therefore this is the one that I would choose over the Party Mix. But I have to say, for the price, you can scratch on this really, really well. I could perform any scratch technique that I wanted on this controller. So if you're a DJ and you want to learn how to scratch, then the DDJ-FLX4 is going to be more than enough to get you started. In fact, I actually used the Flex 4 for some of the beginner lessons in my own full scratching course. If you would like to find out more about that, then just hit the link in the description. Okay, so next up we've got the DDJ-REV1, and this is a Serato only controller. First impressions are the jog wheel is a really good size. It's about the same size as the DDJ-FLX4, maybe slightly smaller. And something else I really like is the crossfader has nothing around it. All of the other controllers so far, everything's really cramped, but really what you want as a scratch DJ is you want a nice amount of space around the crossfader. This will allow you to do intricate scratching techniques using the fader and not hit any buttons or knobs while you're doing it. Okay, I think this is the best fader that I've used so far. It doesn't feel too cheap and it's not too clicky and too plasticky. And I actually felt like my transformer scratches came through tightest on this fader. Now the jog wheel is almost perfect. For me, it's just a tiny bit too loose. Although it's not a deal breaker, I still think the jog wheel on the REV1 is pretty good. I actually prefer the jog wheel on the Flex 4, but honestly, there's not much in it at all. When you consider the good crossfader on the REV1, I would say that this is an excellent option for any DJ who wants to learn scratching. This controller will not hold you back when you're learning new scratch techniques, so the REV1 gets a thumbs up from me. Next up, this is the newest controller on the list. This is the DDJ-FLX2 from AlphaTheta. This came out only a few months ago, and it's pretty similar to the DDJ-FLX4, it's just smaller and has less features. Now my first impressions are, the jog wheels are quite small, but the resistance is there. I actually like my jog wheels to just be slightly heavier than they are on the REV1, and these are, yeah, slightly heavier. You can see, when I sort of push the jog wheel, you can see it stops moving pretty quickly, and that's how I like it. Having that little bit more resistance just gives you that bit more control over the scratch sample. So let's try scratching. Now for me, the jog wheel and the fader feel really good on this controller. I do wish the jog wheel was just that little bit bigger like it is on the FLX4, but then of course the controller would cost a lot more money. So if the size of the jog wheel is important to you, then the REV1 or the FLX4 would probably be a better option. But apart from that, if you're a beginner and you wanted to learn scratching, the FLX2 is going to be more than enough to get you started, and I don't think it's going to hold you back too much. I think the crossfader and the jog wheel are perfectly adequate for most scratch techniques that beginners are going to learn, so the FLX2 would be a really good choice. And finally, our last controller in today's video will be the Reloop Ready. And my first impressions for this is the layout is quite unique. The pads for the size of the controller are absolutely huge. The jog wheel on this looks slightly smaller than some of the others, and the resistance is a tiny bit more loose than the FLX2 and the FLX4. It feels a bit more like the REV1, which is no bad thing. They're all good, but I'm interested to see how I get on with this jog wheel since it's just a little bit more loose. The crossfader feels nice. However, the up faders are super close to the crossfader. So if I had this up fader down, I'm going to constantly hit that up fader. So that's something to bear in mind. It's not a deal breaker, but it would have been nice to have a little bit more room around the crossfader. So now let's try out scratching. This is actually one of the best crossfaders of all of the controllers that we've covered today. It just feels super smooth and doesn't have that horrible plastic clicky sound. However, for me, the jog wheel is just that little bit too loose. You can see when I push it like that, it just moves a tiny bit more than it does on the FLX4 or the FLX2. For me, the best jog wheels of the day were the FLX4 followed by the FLX2, but the best crossfader is probably this one here on the Reloop Ready. Now, out of all of today's controllers, this is the one that surprised me the most. It's not perfect because the crossfader doesn't cut in quite sharp enough. However, the jog wheel, the feel of the jog wheel and the feel of the crossfader is actually one of the best today. I wouldn't call that my favorite, but this one surprised me the most. I also think the Reloop Ready right here is a contender for the top spot. The jog wheel feels good, and overall, I think this would be a great option for anyone wanting to learn to scratch on a budget DJ controller. But for me, the top spot has got to go to the FLX4 simply because of the jog wheel. I think the crossfader does feel really good on this. It is one of the best crossfaders, but the jog wheel, they're the best size, they have the best tension, and honestly, it just feels more comfortable to scratch on. So the winner today for me is the DDJ-FLX4, but there really was not a lot in it. Second place, I would say, goes to the Reloop Ready. I would also say that most of these controllers are usable for learning to scratch. If scratching is your main focus, then I would stay clear of the Hercules Starlight, purely because of the size of the controller. I think that controller has a lot of uses for traveling DJs and even people who just want to give DJing a go. But those jog wheels are just too small for learning scratching properly. So if that's your goal, I would stay clear of the Starlight. Apart from that, all of these controllers that I covered today are perfectly usable for learning how to scratch. Now, if you're on a real budget, I would go for the DDJ-FLX2. The crossfader feels really good for the price, and the jog wheels have a really nice resistance to them. They're not too loose, and I think that will really help you if scratching is your focus. Now, if you're serious about learning to scratch properly, no matter what gear you're using, then you should check out my Ultimate Scratching course. It has over 80 lessons and it teaches you everything that you'll ever need to know about learning to scratch properly. If you'd like to check it out, then just hit the link in the description. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video useful. And if you would like to check out more from me and my channel, then YouTube recommends this video right here.